doesn't work. You should tell everybody. It's a fake clicker. I told him, it's the wand that finds the wizard. And so this broken wand found me. So make of that what you will. The wand finds the wizard. Come on, Harry Potter. That's my point. What meaning would you make of that? The broken wand found me. It's like, let's find this broken man. I don't think that's what the book says. That's what you say. That's your fan fiction of the book. Well, then I'm telling my jokes to the wrong audience. Oh, that's weird. Luckily, it's not a cartoon, but I'm not a fantasy person. Not a fantasy person. That's good. I like that too. I like the wars, not the trek. I'm not into the trekking. I'm into the warring. Yeah, friends. New Girl. I've watched a couple episodes. It's fun. Yeah. Oh. Cool. Well, I can. I just have to be somewhere. I teach a class in a business school that starts at 12:30. So if I leave at 12, we're good. So if we can just split. I think that's fine. I sort of saw people filtering in and it seemed like there was a time coming up, but I'm fine. I think they're flexible. So, yeah. And if we want to wait till then, I can adjust our programming. That's fine. Yeah, I just mean if the vast majority of people start walking in at 10:30, then that would be weird. If like 100 people come at 10:30. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's wait, 10 minutes or so. Maybe we'll get started at 10:15. Does that sound good? Yeah, I have a little bit of flexibility on the back end. I just have to be on campus at 12:30, so if I leave here at noon, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, no worries. I teach in had like a time mix-up with some of the membership, and so I think that they had switched the time back 30 minutes, but I don't know if that message got received by everybody. So people are still filing in, thinking it starts at 10:30. So. And I have y'all sort of like positioned. I will. Oh, you mean like this? No, it doesn't need to be one of the days. Saying, this is the work we're doing. We have some folks here too. Yeah. I grew up in a military base. Yeah. Hey, will y'all get, maybe you're too close and it would be weird, but we need to find people to get pictures.
Oh, oh. People are still coming in, so we're just waiting 5 more minutes, and then we'll get started. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our SINO meeting on the third Saturday of the month. Normally at 10:30, today is an exception to the rule where we wanted to get started as early as we could. So have a few little announcements, and then we will get going with the program. An announcement that our pop-up protests are on the second Sunday of every month, and they are from 2 to 3. And what we're doing is, because there is now an ordinance that says that if you want to protest with more than 25 people, you have to get a, what's the word? Permit, thank you. You have to get a permit, and then they basically tell you where you can protest. So they're putting baby in the corner right now. And I, for one, am tired of being at Brittlebank Park and Hampton Park, like when there's no traffic whatsoever, and you know we're kind of there holding up signs for each other. So these pop-up protests were the SINO gals got together and we're like, what can we do about this? There's got to be something we can do. Well, why don't we just have groups of 24 pop up all over Charleston, which is so much worse and better. So that's what we started doing a couple of months ago, and it's really working. It's effective. The first month we did it, we were actually on the Rachel Maddow show for, yes, yay, which was definitely our thumbs up to keep moving forward. That really let us know that we're in the right direction. And also these groups of people that are coming out to protest is just brilliant. I mean, everybody's signs are so clever and there's so much enthusiasm, and the people walking by are interested. They want to know. And there's so many fewer people that have anything negative to say than all the positive that we're getting. So just to let you know, I think there are a lot more people on both sides of the middle that need to come together. I think we're by far the majority. We're not the far left or the far right. We're trying to bring some semblance of organization and save our democracy. So that's what we're going to do. Just to let you know, October 1st is the extreme abortion ban hearing in Columbia. I don't know who's been following this, but the laws they want to pass, it would be, if you got an abortion, it would be considered homicide. That's the legislation that they're going for. So it's really important that we show up, as many people as can. We thought what we would do is get a carpool together. So anybody that wants to do this, please email me at sino.charleston@gmail.com. And if you let me know you want to go, then we'll get you into a car and we'll all go up together. And I think the more people that show up, the better it's going to be. Yes. Okay. SINO, SINO, .charleston@gmail.com. Yeah, 9:30, so we'd have to take off probably about 7, I would think, something like that. So anyway, wanted to let you know also that our October meeting, which will be the third Saturday in October, we have our very own Susan Dunn, who's the attorney for the ACLU here, and Armin Durfner, who is a constitutional law expert. And they're going to be talking to us about the Constitution and about exactly what's happening right now. Why is the Constitution being challenged? What's happening and what's actually legal, what's not legal. And also they're going to address free speech because obviously that's the buzzword of the moment. Then in November, we're going to have a health and science presentation. And we've got all kinds of programs coming up at the beginning of next year, all through the year. And what we're doing is we're trying to work it out so that each one of our groups does a presentation every month at our meeting. So reproductive rights will do a month. The environment will do a month. And that way we get educated on all these different topics that are the hot topics we voted on at the very first meeting. So we're still addressing those particular issues. Really excited today for the pop-up protest, if anybody wants to sign up or get more information, there's a sign up in the lobby afterwards, and you can look for Susan Dunn. She will have a sign up and also has more information. And finally, last but not least, we're so excited about our presentation this morning. And I want to introduce Mary Koster, PhD. She has a PhD in Science, Literacy, and Communication, USC Center for Science Education, an adjunct professor at the College of Charleston for Climate Control, and a fellow of the James Neer Center for Climate Studies. And she will be introducing our guest speaker today for the Civility Initiative. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually Mary Johnston.
I'm so sorry.
That's fine. I have the honor of introducing today's speaker. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this morning we have the privilege of hearing from a rock star. He just forgot his guitar. In the field of peace building, Mike Lee, a professor of communication at the College of Charleston, has spent years studying, teaching, and writing about peace building. His books are about history, political communication, and rhetoric. At every turn, he has applied his wisdom in practical ways that positively affect the discourse in our country. In addition to teaching, he is the director of the College of Charleston's Civility Initiative, which promotes healthy disagreement and dialogue across differences through speakers, debates, and workshops. He also hosts When We Disagree, a podcast about memorable disagreements in our lives. I love this podcast and promise that listening to it will help you reach across the aisle with both courage and compassion. Mike's books have earned over 12 awards, including 5 National Book Awards for his book, Creating Conservatism, Post-War Words That Made an American Movement. His latest book is We Are Not One People, Separatism and Secession in American Politics since 1776. It is with deep gratitude and nearly uncontainable excitement that I now hand the podium over to Mike Lee.
Well, I don't often begin by blushing, so thank you for that. I also think that was a little bit cruel because if you set a really high bar and then I fail to meet it, you're setting me up to fail, so thank you very much for that. If you would start at the beginning, I'd like to ask everybody a question to start, which is, what does it feel like to be wrong? And I don't mean that rhetorically. I would love to have answers. What does it feel like, literally, to be wrong? Say it again. Embarrassing. I heard 2 embarrassings. What else? Humbling. What were you going to say, Leah? That's a good point. It could vary. It sounds like we have a lot of people with very weak self-esteem in here who are embarrassed by that. Anybody else, too? Perhaps it's situational, perhaps it's embarrassing, perhaps it's shameful. You get defensive, you get angry. Well, here's my parlor trick, which is that those are all feelings that happen when you know you're wrong. Feeling wrong feels exactly the same as feeling right. And dozens of us, perhaps all of us, certainly me, standing here, a rock star, are wrong about dozens of things that you have no idea you're wrong about right now, at the very moment. And then the next question is, well, how do you learn that you're wrong? Somebody tells you. Somebody, yeah, you have to find alternative points of view. In other words, you have to talk to people or at least read opinions with which you don't already agree, who share a different point of view about the world. And that is what the Civility Initiative is entirely devoted to, which is to counter all of the advice that I got in the 1980s, which is to talk to strangers. Find some strangers and talk to those strangers. That is what I'm preaching. That is the gospel that I'll be preaching. I begin with 2 additional opening questions. I mean for these to be kind of food for thought, and we're going to come back to these at various points during the talk. The first one is about a time that you were persuaded. And think about that. Think about your original position, your subsequent position, and what it took to move from A to B, and what it took to move to that C subpoint, which is at least admitting it, if not to yourself, but publicly so, perhaps to the person who persuaded you. And thinking about that process. I doubt that it was that quick. I doubt that it was one article, one documentary, even one book. You know, it might have been something more lengthy and patient. The second one is, and we do stories, and Margaret is in the room today, and I'm grateful for that. We do stories of unlikely alliances at the college. One of the programming, and I'm foreshadowing the programming we do. The programming we do is all about unlikely alliances. Stories of beautiful, curious, bizarre, surprising connections that people can make across great gulfs in their life, across enormous demographic differences that we all share. And so I'm always looking for, whether it's in fiction and art, and of course in nonfiction, those kinds of stories that we can feature to show that some compassionate curiosity towards others, even others with whom we vehemently disagree with, even others with whom we have been told are enemies in our midst, can create powerful democratic outcomes. I want to share a bit with you about what we do. So what we do in general is to promote dialogue across difference and healthy disagreement. That is the twin mission of the Civility Initiative. That's really all we're up to. And if you go forward a little bit, what we're finding is that we have dozens and dozens and dozens of public-facing events every year. A lot of these are on the college, a lot of these are in churches, sometimes in bars, sometimes at retirement centers. I see some folks who I just talked to actually from the Charleston Creative Retirement Center just recently, and many other places. I sort of think about the college as our central point, and then we circle and widen out from there to reach the city, the low country generally, and then the nation at large. All of our events are about conflict, but all of our events are not about political conflict. So all of our events are about conflict, but that walk of life could be, we get therapists together to talk about what healthy conflict looks like in a roommates or in a marriage. We will get political scientists together to talk about the history of conflict in the United States. We'll get historians together to talk about constructive conflict, about how we memorialize our past. We will get international relations folks together to talk about, is the world getting more or less dangerous? What is the future of international conflict in our world, and so forth, right? So it is inclusive, but not limited to the present day conflict that's on all of our minds, right? The kind of demographic differences or party differences that animate so much protest today. We also, to that end, have an upcoming event that I'd like to invite you all to. So I'm here because I'm honored to be here, but I'm also here to invite you to a party. And on the 2nd of October, the Civility Initiative will host, it'll be 3 of us on stage, myself, Bakari Sellers, a prominent commentator, former state representative in South Carolina. Trey Gowdy, famously in the House of Representatives, is now a very prominent podcaster and TV show host on Fox News, and is a very popular author as well, and has a few books about dialogue across difference. The 3 of us will share the stage to talk about how do we continue the courage of our convictions and be humble, compassionate, and curious at the same time. In other words, how do we thread that needle? How do we stand up for what we believe in and not alienate our fellow citizens in the same turn? If you'll keep going. And then, of course, the podcast that I host, I'm honored to share with you, which is called When We Disagree. In each guest, a person who's thoughtful about conflict, maybe they've written a book, maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they're somebody I've just been talking to on the street and they come on the show. It's truly random people come on and they answer one question, and that question is, what's a sticky disagreement in your memory? What's a disagreement or a conflict you just can't get past, for whatever reason? Any reason. It could be philosophical, it could be personal, it could be political, and it could be professional. At the end of the day, they're all sort of personal in a way, but all of those categories are welcome. And over 80 episodes, we've had disagreements about mom, disagreements amongst brothers and sisters, disagreements about the President of the United States, disagreements about Israel, disagreements about the law, and disagreements about how to be a good person and what happiness means. So everything from the highest possible questions to medium stakes questions down to low stakes, pineapple on a pizza. Is that unjust? Are you evil if you eat barbecue chicken pizza? And the answer obviously is yes. So you don't even need to listen to that episode to learn that that's bad for you and bad for the nation. In any case, over 80 episodes, we've explored that and others. And the point is to deliver these controversies to all of us and say, conflict is unavoidable. The question is, how do we manage our comfort levels of mixed conflict, reflect on our attachment and our conflict styles, and use conflict perhaps to strengthen our relationships? One thing I find is that some of us treat conflict like an irritant, something you have to get around, like traffic. Some people treat conflict like a grenade, which is you hold it carefully and try like heck not to pull the pin, right? So that the nuke doesn't go off. And we are trying to treat conflict like a tool, like fire. It could heat your house or it could burn it down. And so let's find some careful and creative ways to channel the constructive potential of conflict in all of our lives. I like to say that we do nervous system work. It's important to me not to be pigeonholed in a kind of political category, right? We're talking about our personal relationships, our neighborhoods, our communities, our schools, our churches, our streets, of course our politics, of course our political parties, but it is much more than that. And so to me, what we're really doing is we're doing nervous system work. All of the debates, panels, speeches, book talks, this speech, podcast, all of it is all about the collective nervous system. I think this room has a nervous system. This organization has a nervous system, just like you and I have nervous systems. And if you look at the list of social problems that we have, I think they're evenly grouped into what we classically think of as our basic nervous system responses, which is fight and which is flight. The fight issues, I think, are the most obvious ones and the ones that we're really, really concerned about. This is what human beings, anthropologists call human beings' negativity bias. Our negativity bias is towards the worst possible outcome, right? When I say that I do debates on campus, you might imagine what the first questions I get are, right? What if somebody says this? What if somebody pops off? What if? And those questions are always at an extreme. And those, what we're pictured here on at least your left over here, polarization, bigotry, violence, hate speech, cancellation, rage. But the slower creep, the ones that we deal with way more often in my line of work, are silent, and they are insidious. And they are an unwillingness to have conversations, an unwillingness to listen to different media sources, an unwillingness to have a tough conversation with your uncle over, it's always Thanksgiving and it's always the uncle at Thanksgiving. You sort of get my point here. And we have 100 years of data about Americans' happiness levels and Americans' willingness to have conversations and how many friends Americans say they have. Since World War I, Americans have been taking the same sets of surveys. And over time, especially since 2010, for reasons we can debate about, a lot of those numbers have really plummeted. Americans report having fewer conversations, report listening to fewer media sources, report having fewer friends, and it's no surprise that they report higher feelings of anxiety, that they spend more time feeling depressed than they do happy, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there is a causal relationship between knowing your neighbor's last names as a species of kind of engagement with the world and openness and compassion and curiosity, and our feelings of isolation, alienation that lead to a both fight and flight response. And to me, these are work in a kind of infinite, mutually reinforcing loop. So our work has to be about both. It can't be about one or the other. Is the more I fight you, the easier it is for me to flee from you. And the more I flee from you, the easier it is for me to fight you, to demonize you from way over there. Because I don't know you, and I'm not looking at your face when I tell you what I tell you, when I tell you what time it is. And so, to me, we have to work on both of these simultaneously, because if we're not, it's like mopping up the floor, but the sink's still on and the sink is still overflowing, right? The water's still coming on the floor, and here I am, slowly trying to get it all into a bucket and pretending like I'm making some good progress. I also think that this is a kind of like 101 version of the nervous system. There are other categories that are important here too, and anybody who's done medical work knows that freeze and fawn are responses to stress and responses to conflict as well. And freeze, if you've ever had something happen to you where you were in a conflict and you forgot what you were going to say, And then you remembered it 15 minutes later and you think, God, why didn't I say that to that person? That's what the French call l'esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the escalator, when you remember the thing after the fact. But that's a freeze response. Or if you've ever been in a heavy conflict with somebody and you just truly freeze, it feels like you can't move. Right? It feels like you can't respond. That impacts our social relationships, but that's where the heart rate really slows down. The blood comes to the center of the body, not like fight and flight where the blood goes to your extremities and your heart starts really flying. They're really, really different physiological responses, and the same is true with fawn. Fawn, the heart rate slows down. Fawn, the heart or the blood pools in the center near the heart to protect your center. And people fawn over perhaps abusers or fawn to end arguments more quickly or apologize in advance, right? How many of us have just tried to end an argument and say, look, I'm sorry, and you take blame for something perhaps that you didn't take the blame for, you shouldn't take the blame for. Or you're trying to short circuit the argument because it feels so uncomfortable. And so all of these, I think, impact our social engagement. So when we're doing these panels, debates, speeches, workshops like this, I try to get folks to be mindful about the way that conflict shows up in our bodies, in your responses, in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And there's lots of reasons, as is shown here, that we're nervous, right? There's lots of reasons to feel anxious about the world around us. 50% of Americans have this negativity bias about an impending civil war. But the next one is also true, that we're also concerned about our isolation from one another. And our isolation from one another is technologically enabled, right? One of my parlor tricks is to give speeches like this, or when I'm teaching a class, is to watch the exit after I'm done, and just to see how many people, are here, right? And they're walking out. They're not here. They're not talking. They're not shaking hands. They're not giving hugs. They're just here, figuring out who contacted them or who didn't contact them, because it's time to get back to their precious. And I'm guilty of this, and all generations are guilty of this. So this is not a finger wagging, young people these days. And there is real data on this since 2010, that slow decline of social relationships that I talked about earlier, what the very famous sociologist Robert Putnam talked about as bowling alone in the late 1980s and early 1990s, that bowling alone has really diminished since social media, but it's way before that. And if you keep going, you'll see that this pattern of not knowing our neighbors' last names predates Facebook, predates the internet, predates Tim Cook and Steve Jobs and the iPhone, predates all of this kind of stuff, predates noise-canceling headphones, whatever you want to put it on, whatever technology you want to put it on. And it also predates the next slide, too, which is that overwhelming numbers of Americans think that our public behavior towards one another has gotten considerably worse. Something along the lines of 80% in the latest poll, and this poll was released just 3 weeks ago, 80% of Americans, if you ask them, have we gotten ruder to each other since COVID? They say yes. Now, whether that's true or not is sort of immaterial, because if they think it's true, then they're going to behave in the world like it is true. And if it's also true and they're behaving in the world like it is true, then it is a kind of double reinforcing problem there. And so to that end, I say that our goal is, like, what am I pushing for? I'm pushing for us to be able to deliberate together. And the Civility Initiative is called the Civility Initiative because I believe in what one writer, and I'm a college professor, so you're going to hear me cite a lot of books here. So this book is called Mere Civility, and I believe in mere civility. Civility is beneath politeness. Civility is beneath respect. You see an ex at a party that you didn't expect to see your ex at, and you make a tacit agreement that we can coexist here together. Like, that is what we're talking about here. It is, if we think about how do we deal with people with whom we disagree, we have silence on the one hand, and we've tried that and it doesn't seem to work. We have violence on the other hand, and nobody's endorsing that ever as a democratic option. And then we have something in the middle. And even when there's discord, even when there's polarization, if we can lean into mere civility, the basic building blocks of peaceful coexistence and engagement, that's what we're pushing for. And so then that ability to reason together, to stay together like a big jury, for instance, even if we dislike each other, we're still a national jury, or we're still a church, or we're still a family, whatever it is threatened by two things. It's threatened by, on your left, distrust. We're not going to reason together. We're not going to stay in the same room together. We're not going to answer the same questions together if we don't trust each other. If I just think that you're going to lie about it, or I don't trust you to make a moral choice, that's going to be a problem. And if you and I can't at least roughly agree on reality, the reality of the world that we live in, on a basic set of facts, on a basic set of sources that we agree are reliable, then we're going to have a hard time. And so there's two methods, and we really preach both of these methods to address both problems. One is dialogue. And dialogue means letting go of winning and being compassionately curious about somebody else's perspective without trying to correct them, just to understand them. It doesn't mean you're validating it, doesn't mean you're affirming it, doesn't mean you're agreeing with it. I'm just trying to see if I can understand how you got from A to B, and that's it. It's not about the facts. It's about what is my compassion and my curiosity for the story that you are telling yourself about the facts as you see them. And that's it. That's what dialogue is. And that's great for trust building, because when people feel seen, when people feel that their values have been affirmed, their life experience is being examined, they can trust and they can build relationships. But if I'm just valuing your experience and saying good for you, and you believe that the earth is flat, then I think we're going to run into problems. So dialogue is good for one thing, but it's not good for information. It's not good for agreement on the facts. It's not good for conclusions and moving forward. And so there we need a sharper edge tool, which is debate, which is healthy conflict. So dialogue can get us some things, debate can get us the other things. It's tough to have debates without dialogue, but oftentimes dialogue can lead into the debates, the fights we need to have. That's our twin methods for dealing with these two problems leading to deliberation. And if I could put it more simply, I'd ask those of you who have been in long-term relationships to think about the necessity of dialogue, and you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And these are not my words, these are the famous couples therapist Esther Perel's words, who says, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And you think about this as a nation. Do you want to be a right or do you want to be a citizen? Do you want to be right or do you want to be a member of this church? Do you want to be right or do you want to go to this college? I mean, this is true all the way down the chain, but it hits home most closely in a marriage. And then if we go further, though, we see sometimes the necessity of debate. Sometimes we do need at least a good guess about the facts in order to move forward. Sometimes we have to come to at least some sense of an agreement about what's true, what happened, or what's likely to happen if we take a certain action in order to move forward. So it's both simultaneously. And if we'll go forward, we can see that I think the work is very capacious, right? The work is very capacious. We try to use the college to reach the low country, to reach the nation, and we're trying to use debate and dialogue to promote greater deliberation. If there's one sort of stalking horse, one main takeaway that I'd like to leave you with, it's this one, which is that I think that social cohesion is promoted when we have engagement across difference. Whether it's dialogue or whether it's debate, we have really great data that says that dialogue, cross difference, and debate have two clear functions. One is that when I have a successful connection across lines of difference, it moderates how I see myself. In other words, I don't think that I got up and drank a giant glass of goodness, of quality, grade A, pasteurized goodness today. And it also moderates how I feel about you. Even if we disagree, I don't think that you got up and drank a giant glass of Satan evil when you stepped into the world and got out of bed. I might think that you are misinformed. I might think reasonable people can disagree, but what many political scientists call motive attribution asymmetry. I attribute a motive to you that is the opposite of mine. I attribute you acting in the world as being evil, whereas mine is good. I attribute you as being unjust, I am just. You sort of get my point here. Dialogue across difference relaxes those two poles. It doesn't create moderate politics. That's not what this is about. It creates moderate views of self. You're less righteous and more uncertain. It creates compassion and curiosity towards the other. In other words, and this is a very Charleston thing to say, which is, I just think we need more bridge builders. Like I said earlier, I'm trying not to break this. Like I said earlier, I think we need to talk to strangers, but those of us who were alive 40 years ago know that that might need a rebrand. So a very Charleston-specific rebrand. We need more bridge builders, and that's the work that we're doing on campus that we're going to share with you today. With that in mind, I want to share a few stories with you about success of bridge building. I think that it's important to make a few distinctions first about the importance of bridge building and the success of bridge building. One, there's a difference between stress, de-stress, and distress. I was at a college campus recently and I saw, giving a talk like this in San Antonio, as a matter of fact, and I saw a sign on their campus that said, "Come inside, students, and de-stress for success." That's a lot of S's. De-stress for success. And I thought, that is exactly backwards. Like, they've got it completely flipped upside down, right? You go to college to be stressed. You go to study abroad to be stressed. You go to the gym to be stressed. You run a marathon to be stressed. You speak a different language to be stressed. Anything novel in your life will create the stress of that novelty. The question is not lack of stress or stress. The question is, what is good stress and what is chronic stress? And so if I didn't have stress, I would walk out into Meeting Street. Stress keeps me alive. I need to be stressful about laying down in traffic. That's a very good thing for my body to understand. Not to mention that it's impossible to live without any stress. You wouldn't want it, and you can't get there anyway. And so if we make people feel like if they're experiencing stress, they've somehow failed in their humanity, they've failed in our modern project of constant entertainment and constant dopamine and constant feeling good, then yeah, they're gonna silo off and not wanna feel the stress that it takes to build a bridge. If we can talk about good, productive stress that creates resiliency and balance that with safety, then I think we're in a better spot. And that brings me to the second one, which is that feeling unsafe is not the same thing as being unsafe. And finally, I grew up in a very high conflict house, and I've really taken to this work. I've only learned later, I didn't know this at the time, of course, that I never understood that there was a difference between anger and rage. The two were always coterminous to me, right? The anger inevitably leads to rage, or there's just no difference. It's a constant eclipse, a full eclipse of anger and rage. And then when I did debate in college and in high school and then coached debate for years afterwards, what I realized, it really gamified something that I was scared of, right? And then now we're trying to gamify and make this fun in a way that many in the nation are scared of. And so that to me is what we can promote, is to find space for positive emotion. And anger can often be one of those positive emotions, because all of you have had relationships where you had an angry conversation that needed to happen and the relationship got better as a result. You didn't have a rageful conversation, I doubt, and the conversation got better. But I bet you had an angry one, and somehow you broke through something and you got there. And if we could show you what I'm talking about here. So this work, and I'm going to move pretty quickly through these, all of these stories, I invite you to think of the person in your life with whom you have the least in common. The person you just fight with the most about whatever you're fighting about. For me, it's my Uncle Stan, and that is his real name. And Stan and I just truly, there is not a thing in the world, it feels like sometimes, that we can get there on. And these stories are far greater a gulf than me and Stan. And if we go forward, so some of these are memorialized in some wonderful documentaries. On the far right, you'll see the story of Ben Klutze, who is a Ghanaian libertarian, who is now the director of the Mercatus Center at George Mason. We had him on campus. He was on the podcast recently to talk about his work in bringing people together to have dialogue across difference at big tables that he hosts. If you keep going, you'll find other stories as well that I think are even more powerful. Dia Khan is here. Dia Khan has two documentaries, one where she embedded herself in the jihadist right. She's an American Muslim woman, but she doesn't wear a hijab. She speaks in public. She does great work. She has huge political opinions. And so the jihadists are not thrilled about her public presentation. And then she embedded herself in with the white nationalist community in the United States. And in both cases, she made unlikely friendships at great personal risk, right? At great risk. And she said, and if you scroll one more, you'll see the quotation that I love, is that being active citizens and human beings means we can't afford to give up on each other. And then where that arrow is, that not giving up on each other matters when you are able to extend it to somebody who might not deserve it or who you might not like or agree with. Otherwise, we become just like them and in the process do their bidding. And all of the stories I'm going to tell, and I'll tell another one here, come from that line of reasoning. This is the Sikh temple outside of Milwaukee, where the 10 shots were fired, 8 people were killed in 2012, and this guy, if you scroll forward, Pradeep Singh, lost his father in the massacre, and had, over the course of the next year, the same kinds of cycles of grief and anger and rage that you might imagine, and reached out to the white nationalist community in Milwaukee, where the shooter had been a white nationalist community, radicalized in that sub-community, and asked to meet with somebody to figure out why that somebody would do this. I mean, truly, why would you come into our sanctuary with this kind of hate in your heart? Meets Arno Michaelis. Arno Michaelis and him have tattoos of the date on their hands. Arno Michaelis renounced his way of thinking about race and religion in the world. They co-wrote a book on empathy, and now they travel the country doing empathy trainings together. One of my other favorite stories also shows the moderating power of difference in this book here. Again, I told you, college professor, a lot of books. So this book is a beautiful, beautiful book, rising out of hatred, about Derek Black. And Derek Black was David Duke's godson. So he grew up in the white nationalist Klan community in Louisiana. The Klan, you might know, and some white nationalists have an idea that the world was better in the medieval era because there's this fiction that everything was very hierarchically organized. In other words, everybody was where they were supposed to be on the social station in a kind of like global caste system, and that all of the races were separate. And so he had gone to college to learn medieval history so that he could find some intellectual heft to justify the views that he had grown up with. Now, he gets to college and he takes some medieval studies classes, and it turns out that none of that is the case. In any case, what was really important was that as he learned that a lot of that wasn't the case, he was getting invited to Seder after Seder after Seder after Seder. And he had these deeply anti-Semitic ideas, amongst others. And through the process of accepting invitations and interacting with people, he slowly realized that he had to give up his worldview. And what the book is about that's so powerful is it's not like our beliefs are the result of our computer imagery of the world. In other words, you believe what you believe, not necessarily because you think you've got all the facts. It's not a strictly rational process. It's emotional, and it ties us to our families, and it ties us to our tribes. And so in giving up his beliefs, he has to give up his family. He has to give up his heritage. He has to give up the people that love him. And so that's a heck of an ask of somebody. So to recognize not just the psychological and rational consequences of belief, but the social ones as well, the things that keep us safe and happy. And he gave them up. And so did some of the people I'm about to talk about here. So I'm going to show you some images that are just truly, utterly bizarre. This is Daryl Davis. He's a concert pianist. He was playing, and there's another one here if you go forward. He was playing in 2012 at a Maryland club, and some white men approached him after the show and said they really liked the songs they were playing. And the songs they were playing were Marvin Gaye covers, Tammy Terrell covers, Eurythmics covers, all sorts of covers. And so, like a lot of people do, they bought him a beer, and they sat down with him, and they talked about music and how much they loved music. And then these two guys casually mentioned that they were members of the Maryland Ku Klux Klan. But they'd been talking in a friendly way for like an hour. And so Daryl Davis is terrified, of course, but then also something's not making any sense. Right? They've had a friendly conversation. They bought him a couple beers. Something doesn't check out. And so he nervously says, well, I'm going to go, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. And so bring some friends. And what did they do? Well, they brought some friends. And so then the same thing happens, and him and a much larger group of Klan members in a crowded bar have a conversation about how much they love 70s soul music, right? And then you find, they go forward, that since 2012 up till the present, that he has personally convinced 200 members of the Ku Klux Klan to renounce their ways. Not just to renounce them, they gave up their robes, right? They gave up their robes in order to be with him. And I'm going to skip through the next one here because I want to make sure that we have time for our students and time for questions as well. So if we go to, the question for me then, and for all of us is, Dia Khan, Daryl Davis, Pradeep Singh, Derek Black, all of these stories, as I said, like if you remember me and Stan, all of these stories are at enormous distances with lots of histories of fraught relationships, to say the least, and violence, to say the worst, between them. These are folks who are putting themselves in active harm's way and making amazing, curious, bizarre alliances in real time that we can talk about. Not all of us are going to leave this church and find the most violent, racist, or whatever person that we can find and try to make friends with them today. And nor is that what I'm suggesting that you do. The question then for all of us, I think, is what can we learn from these examples where persuasion is happening in places that our polarized culture tells us it can't happen? Our culture says that we are forever, always strangers, if not strangers to each other, then enemies of one another, and that's not the case. And these stories show that over and over and over again. So what can we learn from that? And how can we do it at scale? How can we do it where it's just not one-on-one, 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 where it's these folks taking huge risks to persuade one person at a time? It's very slow. If people are radicalizing quickly en masse, then one person at a time is not going to work. There's some promising research, and that's what we're doing at the college, at the Civility Initiative. And just to give an example of the kind of work where it can be successful, Stanford flew 1,000 people to Texas, to Dallas, Texas, during the 2020 election, and had them organized in tables at a hotel room discussing specific issues like the minimum wage, the border, a Supreme Court case, you get it, and then middle issues like a specific election, Biden, Harris, Trump, and others, and then bigger picture issues like, do you think the country's headed in the right direction? Do you trust your fellow Americans? So really high level questions, so high, medium, and low. And the statistics they gathered on these 1,000 people's participation, and they're chosen from every walk of life, is fascinating. You see 30% increases in the belief that democracy is working or can work. You have, I call it motive attribution asymmetry, which is just, do people have good reasons to think differently than you? Can we humanize the process of disagreement or say that great minds don't always think alike? Yes, we see a faith in that idea increase roughly 17% or so. We see the percentage of people who think that their opponents are idiots or who are brainwashed or who are evil drop roughly 20%. And then the most amazing statistic is we find 95% of people finding the compassionate curiosity that I'm trying to get to at the Civility Initiative. 95% said they learned a lot about people very different from me. And so with that in mind, I think that we can take a few lessons, and then I want to share the specific programs that we're going to do at the college where we're trying to enact these very lessons. The lessons I have taken from these events that I'll share with you and these stories and many other books and scholarship on the subject are a few. So if you're trying to practice these in your own life, and we have workshops on these, multi-day workshops on these, so I'm gonna go more quickly than I usually would with each of these, is one from Daryl Davis. We have had a multi-year, multi-decade experiment with what the culture calls platforming. Like, oh, I don't want to platform that, I don't want to platform that, I don't want to platform that. What happens when you ignore something, when you shun something, is that it doesn't cease to exist. Right? It's what psychologists call object permanence. Like when my dog doesn't see me, does my dog think I still exist just because it's not there? But I'm still around in the world. If I don't go to school one day, school still happens. And so there is this sense that we have as a culture that if we're not platforming something, it will just go away. But in fact, it gets stronger because they find each other and they radicalize. And that can happen on any side, right? There is no they. That happens as human beings. And so if there is no entertainment between us, no interaction between us, then we actually risk strengthening the thing that we're shunning. The second thing is, it doesn't mean that we infinitely validate. It doesn't mean that we get snowed over or we're susceptible to lies and misinformation and disinformation. Do your homework. I sort of think of this like a pitch, right? You're a batter and there is a pitcher. One, are you willing to step into the box? Two, how equipped are you to take a swing at the pitch being thrown? And three, how curious are you about the pitcher that wants to throw it? It doesn't mean that you're joining that person's team. In fact, you could still be on opposing teams and try to hit a home run. But just the process of limited engagement, again, mere civility is beneath politeness, beneath respect. What it means is not pulling all of your punches, but not landing them all at the same time. Right? That's what mere civility means, and that's what we're trying to promote. Number three, we have a faith in talk, even angry talk. Because as I said, there's a scale between silence on the one hand and violence on the other, and in the middle is communication. That communication is not always hunky-dory, it's not always kumbaya, but it is communication. And if I ask you to go back to the opening question, what's a time you changed your mind? I bet you it was relational. I bet you somebody said something that sparked an interest, and that somebody you trusted, somebody you talked to consistently, and they modeled, and not in all cases, but in many cases, they modeled a belief system that really you saw that it works, or you saw that it's human, or you saw that it's palatable, or you saw that it makes some sense, and you started to increase your curiosity through the relationship, not just with an abstract set of ideas. 4, Daryl Davis didn't convert these people 200 at a time in one fell swoop. It takes time, it takes patience, because persuasion is relational. 5th, we have a lot of data that says that if I am a flat earther, I believe the earth is flat, and you are all these round earthers out there, and you come at me and your first thought is all these facts and figures, and have you seen the pictures from Neil Armstrong on the moon that shows the roundness of the earth, and how could you be so stupid? And they hook me up to an MRI machine that measures what's going on in my brain as I'm hearing your facts. You can imagine what happens. I dig in. Not only do I feel like you're condescending to me, not only do I not trust any of your facts from all these paid off scientists or whatever I think, but it's like you've insulted my sister. I dig in that much more to defend the things that I see as central to my identity. So if our goal is persuasion, I'm not saying abandon facts. I'm saying, well, let's put that third or fourth down the chain. Let's find some common ground in values, find some common ground in passions, and then we get to facts of the case, right? It's not like Daryl Davis was abandoning the facts of black criminality that these Klan members were throwing at him, right? It was after the relationship had been secured, then we can have these high trust debates. Finally, and I'll move through the video here, but one of the things I think is powerful is making a concession. If you knew that I had driven a truck here today, maybe you would make some assumptions about me. If you knew that I had gone to yoga this morning, you might make some assumptions about me. If you knew that I owned a gun, you might make some assumptions about me. In other words, our world today, much more than the 60s, 70s, and 80s, is what one political scientist calls vertically oriented, where my consumer choices, whether I shop at Whole Foods or Walmart, are linked to my car choices, whether I've got a Leaf or an F-150 is linked to my TV choices, whether I'm watching Yellowstone or Dancing with the Stars or football or European soccer, are linked to my church choices, are linked to my firearm choices, are linked to my dress choices, how I costume myself, are linked to whether I live in a gated community or a high density neighborhood or a place that has 2 or 3 acres, and of course, how I vote, right? What she calls these mega identities. And it's easy for us to think that you and you and you and you and you are just members of tribes and you're all walking in lockstep. But American voters are much more mixed up in their political opinions and their practices. We are really jumbles of contradiction. Now I say that all of us live with contradiction some of the time, but some of us live with contradiction all of the time. And my contradictions feel fine to me because they're mine. I wake up with them in the morning, but yours seem bizarre. My point is, let's make a concession. When you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, say something along the lines of, I don't think my side has everything all figured out, and here's an example. And what that does is it taps into a really powerful sense of human reciprocity. If I told you that something really personal about me right now, you might feel compelled to say something really personal in return. If I said I really liked your shoes, maybe you would look at my shoes and say something nice about, well, I like yours too, right? It's sort of back and forth. So we're trying to model the behavior that we want to see in return. If you go to the next list and skip that, you'll see the kind of opposite here. We're trying not to condescend, and condescension shows up in our bodies, in our huffs, in our eye rolls, in the way that we position ourselves, in the way that doesn't communicate compassionate curiosity. And again, compassionate curiosity is not infinite validation, it's just a way to get to relational affirmation. We're trying again to model the behaviors we want, so we're showing our data and asking for data in return. Science doesn't say anything, the media doesn't say anything, Harvard doesn't say anything. There are specific people with specific studies, with specific publications. In other words, let's get to the brass tacks of what are your sources. 3, again, labels can be the enemies of relationships. Well, of course you're saying that, a college professor would say that. Right. Of course you're saying that, a Southerner would say that. Of course you're saying that, a white man would say that. Again, people are incredibly more complicated than we like to think in our polarized era. So let's meet the person and find out curiously what's up with them before we affix a label that has a past meaning on them. And 4, what I'm preaching is debate, what I'm preaching is dialogue, and what I'm preaching requires at least some good faith effort on both parties to participate. If you are making money because you are getting clicks by purposefully outraging people or by monkey wrenching operations, right? If you're rage baiting, as the saying goes online, that's not really, it's not gonna work. And so there is a place where we say, look, this work doesn't work and we need a different strategy. It's not for everybody. Daryl Davis says ignorance can't be cured, but bad faith can't, right? So it does require at least an attempt to inspire folks to engage in this democratic process. And then finally, depolarize within. It's one thing to say that on the next slide, you'll see that I've got this idea that we like to think of what happens between us as the dynamic. But what's really going on is also within us, right? The way that we experience the discomfort of conflict, the way that we show our ego and are unwilling to admit that we were wrong about something, especially if there's an audience, right? Especially if there's an audience. You know, if you and I had a debate and you proved me wrong, maybe I would be more willing to say, you know, I think you kind of got me on this, or I'll go do some more homework on that. But if we're doing it in front of all of you, well, maybe I'm going to dig in a little harder because my ego's at stake. Derek Black showed us that our tribes are at stake too. When you ask people to give up their tribes, it's really hard. And so sometimes people will turn their nose at their beliefs, but just to keep their families, just to keep their signal system, just to keep their friends, right? Maybe they have doubts about whoever the current president is, but they need to show that they are loyal team members in order to stay in the family. Arguing is an embodied activity, going back to fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and all of us experience that conflict differently. That doesn't mean we should run from it. It just means we can find the places in our bodies where it shows up and try to move through it. And then finally, of course, my stalking horses, finding some humility about what you really know, right? What are you going to look back 10 years from now and be embarrassed that you believed? What are people 100 years from now going to look back at us right now and say, I cannot believe those monsters lived under those conditions? The same way we think about perhaps Charleston in the 1850s or 40s. Right? What are we all doing? In other words, we can come down off our high horses a little bit and try to find places where we can meet in the middle, at least roughly, in our common humanity, if not our politics. And I share this in the space of really finding a place for common humanity is James Baldwin on the next one. And James Baldwin really helps us insist on our collective humanity, and I want to show this quick clip, and then I want to tell you about the specific work we're doing with some help of the students who are helping me do this work at the College of Charleston. Doesn't want to party? Just to go to the next one, I'd love to tell you about what we're doing here. The point is about common humanity, and it's just a gorgeous Baldwin clip when he's exiled in Paris, and he takes the audience through walking down a Parisian street, and the point that he says as he looks at somebody who's homeless, as he looks at a cop harassing that homeless person, as he looks at young kids who seem ne'er-do-wells, as he looks at a rich, fancy, very Parisian chic culture and couple, and he says, under a different set of circumstances, I could be those people. Right? I could be that cop, I could be that homeless person, I could be those rich people that were all engaged in a common collective humanity. And there is sort of, but for the grace of God, but for the grace of randomness, but for the grace of a cruel universe that we all inhabit with some curiosity and a lot of terror, that I am standing here, and that you are sitting there, and that I am you and you are me. And so finding a place for common humanity is the basic building block. We have 3 new programs that we're starting. Obviously, we do big public events like the one on the 2nd and many, many others. But we're also doing programs to do this work at scale, because it's one thing to have a book talk. It's one thing to have me come speak. It's one thing to have a single event that just fades into eternity once it's over. You know, maybe it leaves an impact, but how do we train folks to do the skills that keep building on each other? Right? It's one thing to watch a basketball game, but that doesn't make me very good at dribbling. And it's another thing to actually go out in the front yard and dribble the basketball and get a little bit better at dribbling a basketball. So the first 3 is, 1, we have an immersive dialogue and debate faculty fellowship where faculty who feel ill-equipped to introduce and harness the power of constructive disagreement in their classes learn how to do it, and then spend a workshop with me for 4 days learning the tips and tricks of integrating controversies into classes. And we know that from a lot of data that the most likely remembered material for college graduates once they're north of 30 is, and I'm curious, is what you think. The most likely remembered college material amongst folks who are 30 and over is what? I mean college material, not their friends. Not like an epic rager or something. Is number 1 is study abroad, and number 2 is anything that they had a debate about. Not a test, not a book, not a paper, none of that stuff. But what do those both have in common? They're both stressful. They're both controlled stress. It's so stressful to go abroad, right? And it's so stressful to have a debate. but they survive both and they learn from both and they remember both and they have impacts on their lives. The second one that we're doing, and I've got some of our students here, our Free Expression Fellows who are a part of this pilot program, who are so brave and compassionate to be doing this work, who are going to share their stories with you, to do an immersive Free Expression Fellowship where they learn the virtues of debate and dialogue and free expression on college campuses, and then spend a semester actually doing free expression work, holding events, low, medium, and high stakes events. And then finally, we're going to train all incoming students next year. We have a pilot program this year, but all incoming 2,500 students will get access to a scaled program from the Constructive Dialogue Institute to learn how to do better dialogue, to be curious, to ask better questions, to increase their own humility and diminish their uncertainty. Okay, it's my honor to introduce 3 of our Free Expression Fellows to tell you why they're so excited to do this work. Come on up.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank you all for having us. This is truly an amazing opportunity. Hello? Perfect. Yes. Just so excited to see the community that is so interested in the work that we're doing outside of campus. My name is Allie Johnson. I'm a sophomore at the College of Charleston. I am a political science major on the pre-law track with a minor in Spanish. I am a Charleston Honors Fellow. I'm in the Honors College, and I'm a SGA Senator. But most importantly, I'm a Free Expression Fellow. And I don't want you to remember me for my name or what's going on, but just that we have a passion to make change on our campus. On campus, I have experienced different interactions with students, witnessed arguments, witnessed things between professors and students on our campus that it doesn't reflect well on what we believe free expression should be on our campus. People from different sides, differing beliefs, whether it be about pineapple on pizza or whether it be about religion, politics, very hard topics for college students to be talking about. Back in the fall, I became an SGA senator, and we have normally guest speakers, and one of those guest speakers was Professor Michael Lee, and he talked about the Civility Initiative, and I went, this is it. This is a way we can change. And there wasn't many students involved at the time, and I was like, no, this is actually got to change on the student level. So we had several meetings, talked about what's the next step, and I think we need to get students involved. So that's how the Free Expression Fellows and Fellowship came about. We knew that we needed to do training. We knew that we needed to figure out how to actually solve this problem. So this fall, the group of Free Expression Fellows, we are actually doing work in training, conversation amongst ourselves to truly figure out the best way to go about this, whether that be figuring out the best events, learning from experience, whether that's watching other people who do field work on college campuses, seeing what works and what doesn't, what's good debate, what's bad debate, what's good dialogue, what's bad dialogue, and then when we talk about that, and then in the spring we're going to have several events such as debate with a professor, disagree with a professor, Team Conrad or Team Jeremiah from the Summer I Turned Pretty, which that's definitely for the younger audience, but it's okay. Small stakes, low stakes, medium stakes, and high stakes events. I have a true passion for this. I think it's amazing. Being one of the students who has been in those hostile conversations where someone disagreed with me and knowing that I left that conversation feeling small. And I know there's several other students on our campus based on a climate survey that was taken over last school year that they feel small. They feel they cannot express their opinion. No matter where you agree or disagree or how you feel, everyone should be able to express their opinion. So we're very excited about this work. I'm very excited to be able to get on campus and interact with students because that's where we make change, is with the students. Not just, obviously, faculty is amazing and we love all of the work we're doing, but I'm really personally excited to interact with students. And I just wanted to say from the bottoms of our heart that we are so thankful that other people care about what we're doing, and we can't wait to come back with improvements. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Cheyenne Little, and like Allie, I served my school as a senator and in Honors College and as a Free Expression Fellow. I have the privilege to talk about the importance of freedom of speech, and I believe that it's not just a principle written in our Constitution, but a heartbeat to our democracy. It is what allows us to stand, to speak, and to be heard. It matters most not in the easy times, but in the moments that it's hard, when division is present, when voices clash, when it is simple to stay silent, and easiest. But silence has never been the path for progress. Our nation wasn't built on silence. It was not built through generations that persevered through justice to seek justice for all. It was the voices, the brave, unyielding voices that dared to speak when it was hardest, Today on our campus and across the low country in our country, we face the choice to speak only when it's safe or to speak even when it's difficult, to close our ears when we disagree, or to open our hearts to the dialogue that makes us stronger. As students and as leaders, we inherit this responsibility to use our voices with courage and to listen with respect, and to ensure that every person, no matter how different, has the same right to be heard. Freedom of speech is not a privilege, it's a duty. It's our duty to each other and our duty to our democracy and a duty to the generations yet to come. So let us not take the right for granted, let us defend it, and let us honor it, because our future depends on it. And thank you all.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maddie Johnson. I'm a senior at the College of Charleston. I am also a political science major. I'm a sociology minor and a women and gender studies. And I was initially drawn to do this work because I love having open and productive conversations, and I think that can be really hard in our classrooms. I don't think any of us really get the chance to have conversations peer-to-peer in our classrooms because we're so busy learning about whatever we're learning about. So it's really fun being able to come together with cooperation and encouragement for others. Personally, I'm most excited to host our on-campus events. I think those are going to be really awesome, where we can get students to come out and, like Allie was saying, have disagree with a professor, or some movie something or TV something where we can get people talking, even if it's as simple as disagreeing about toppings on pizza, because it's a very heated debate. And I think that having conversations across the aisle where we can just understand it's a student to student or person to person, conversation is really important. I think we're more similar than we are different, and I think that the statistics show that in how we vote and what we believe. And so I think that as young people, we are the next generation who need to encourage this dialogue in our country. And I think we have a really great group of students who, we're all here for each other, and we're going to support each other, and we're going to try to leave our college campus maybe a little bit healthier than how we joined it. Thank you.
So what can we do together? I'm here selfishly because I wanted to share, obviously, the work that we're doing, but I think that there's a few things that I'd ask from you as we close, and I'm curious to hear about all of the things that come up for you as we go. And so there's a few things, which is one, when I started the Civility Initiative about 2 years ago, I started it with a lot of ambition that we could do local, regional, and national impactful work, that we could marry dialogue and debate simultaneously, that we could make this a fundamental part of cultural change, not just at the College of Charleston, but in Charleston generally, and that we could do so relatively quickly, because for all of the cynicism and the negativity bias and the fear, I sensed a great hunger for people who are curious and feel walled in and trapped in a world where they feel like they're walking in a minefield or walking on eggshells. In other words, at all generations, at all ages, they want greater possibilities for connection, even difficult conversations. And we have really struck gold with that. And so over the past 2 years, the success stories we've had are deeply, deeply heartwarming. And those that we get from these students are also eminently heartwarming as well. And so I'm coming with a few asks, and then I'd love to hear your questions. One, if you have any good ideas about what we should be focusing on, you have any objections to what we're doing, I welcome rebuttals as well. You have suggestions for speakers or suggestions for other organizations or people in town that I should talk to, spam me, send me 1 million emails, and I'll do my best to respond to all of them. Second, we are gathering not just student steering committees, not just faculty steering committees, but a community steering committee. This is something that I'm working in real time on. If anybody's curious about being on that steering committee or has suggestions for who should be on that steering committee, please reach out to me. And finally, the Civility Initiative is almost entirely privately donor financed. And so if you like the work that we're doing and would like to see more of it, consider a contribution. I humbly ask for that too. And I'd love to hear your questions. Thanks for listening to us today.
If you could please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you so much for my phone. I'll have to find it later.
Yeah, we can break, that's the message, right? Is to break our phones. Let's all break our phones and get our phones out and snap them.
Thanks for this. This is very helpful. I really appreciate it. My name is Jane Aiken, and I have a number of friends who are losing their jobs in academia. I'm a former academic, but for their conversations, for their positions. And so it seems like now it's getting even more dangerous to have an opinion. So are you addressing that, or do you have any theories about that? Do you have some suggestions for us?
I do, yeah. I mean, one, that's moving in real time, and so that's difficult for all of us to figure out very quickly. Second, you know, one of the most powerful memories I had recently in light of the tragic killing of Charlie Kirk on a college campus is the next day we had a meeting of the Free Expression Fellows, and I had been asking them to watch videos of him and others who were going to college campuses and doing debates, and we were going to try to figure out, you know, what from these viral videos is a positive model, what is a negative model, right? What's an anti-model? We should move away from that. And what should we actually recreate? What topics or strategies or structures? And then ask them, you know, in light of this, you know, how safe do we all feel? And it was almost like for me, like a 9/11 moment. Like given my work, I'll never forget where I was when I learned about that. And given what students are asking themselves to do, and I am asking these students to do, how comfortable do you feel, right? And we all agreed that the work is that much more important in light of these contextual concerns, right? In light of assaults on free speech, in light of contentiousness in the culture, it is that much more important not to turtle up or to go back to our silos and our sub-communities and never peek our heads out like the groundhog, right? So I've redoubled my efforts, and I don't have perfect answers to everybody's question about A, what's going to happen if, and B, what are the most appropriate strategies if somebody's at risk of being terminated or otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. It's just, it's heartwarming. Just to even, you know, give us some hope moving forward. My question is this. I grew up in Charleston and have a lot of quote unquote friends that are MAGA now.
Okay.
And what I'm having trouble with is the ones who are really digging in their heels and that don't want to debate and that feel like right now what's happening is a good thing. And if it's going to be, if we're going to have a dictator, at least it's a conservative dictator. And it's espousing the views that these people believe in. I'm emailing back and forth with one of them, okay. And it's very quiet, but we send each other emails when we're exasperated about something about the other side. Okay. And we've been trying to kind of work through it, but I also see that he's really happy with how things are right now and would love to see things continue in that direction. How do we stop this? How do we stop the momentum that these people have, and that they don't care about whether we're a democracy or a republic?
Yeah, good. I'm glad you asked me the easy ones, and I thank you for the easy one, and thank you for the easy one. And if anybody else has an easy one, get in line. So a few things are coming up for me. One is that I'm hearing you ask two questions. One is about something that's very big, about the culture and the movement of politics, and one is about something small, which is an individual personal relationship. And my answer would be about reciprocity, which is to model the things that you would like to see in the relationship that you would like reflected out into the broader culture is I think the best bet we have, regardless of what side of the fence we happen to live on. And so model the kinds of compassionate curiosity. What I say usually when I put that Mickey Mouse ears thing up about deliberation, thinking and living collectively together with at least some respect, mere civility. And then sometimes we need debate and sometimes we need dialogue. And maybe this is a time for dialogue, and that is a kind of artistic relational judgment that we all have to make in the moment to sustain the connection, assuming you want to sustain the connection. To think about the relationship you would like to have with this person. Maybe it's a thin relationship, maybe it's a thick relationship, maybe it's a consistent relationship, or maybe it's an infrequent relationship, and work backwards to either a more combative debate strategy, how could you possibly feel this way when this is on the line, or a more compassionate curiosity. I'm curious about how you make sense of, this seems so obvious to me, but you seem to have a different interpretation. Can you tell me a story from your life that helps me understand why you feel so strongly about this? And find it in a kind of like humanistic, humanizing disagreement sort of a way, where it becomes about biography and not the facts, where it becomes about stories and not the facts as they see them, because it always comes back to me by the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, who came up with the Serenity Prayer. It's like, what are the things that you and I can reasonably control, right? Whether it was the Biden administration and I'm MAGA, or whether that's Trump administration and I'm more liberal, I don't have any control over that. But what do I have control over? What does this church have control over? What does this organization, what does the Civility Initiative have any sense of control over? Is me and is you, and that is it. That is it. I can't get into Congress, nor would I want to. And so I'm trying to figure out the wisdom to know the difference about what I can and what I cannot control, and then modeling the democratic values and free speech values that you think could ripple out from there to try to create a bigger and better world through very small acts. That's the best I got. Thanks.
I have to do the plug. We are having a workshop in February that we haven't announced yet.
Okay.
It's with the National Coalition Building Institute, sponsored by the YWCA in town.
Okay.
And they in this one-day workshop, I've taken this twice, and they teach us how to speak and how to open up to other people. It's an amazing, transformative workshop where just by listening to the other person who is different from you and coming to an understanding of the humanity of the other person, it's enough to make changes.
That's
But
wonderful.
it's something you might want to look into.
This is, I mean, we literally do this work on campus and in the community. I mean, this is the kind of workshops that we host.
I was going to ask, do you have workshops that your initiative conducts for the public?
Yes, so what we have been doing is I've been working with all the libraries in town to have book clubs that bring people together to have conversations about tough issues. So there have been a few of those at the Cynthia Hurd Library in West Ashley and the and Wando Library as well. We're starting there. Like I said, the campus is sort of our central hub, obviously, and then we coil and widen out. And so then we have been very active on campus. We've been very active nationally with the podcast, which has gotten picked up in trainings and seminars in Nevada and Texas and California. And then we're expanding our range of options, largely through events like this, where I go and meet you in a church and then say, where else should we be working? So part of the reason that I'm coming here and asking for people to join a potential community steering committee is to ramp up that operation and figure out, A, what the market is, and B, where should we host it? So yes, and that's ongoing, and I would love your help.
Anyone else?
Martha.
Hi, Professor Lee. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
I wanted to tell you about, well, I want to first tell you about one thing, a possible use of what you're doing.
Okay.
And then I need to follow up on the question about how to talk to MAGAs.
Yep.
Or simply, for me, how to talk to someone who told me that they voted for President Trump and is a very educated person. And it just stymies me. But first, I've been working with the Charleston Interreligious Council.
Yeah.
And we host January Interfaith Harmony Month.
Yeah.
Are you going to be around in January?
I hope to be.
Okay.
Unless you know something I don't know.
Because a light bulb went off. One of the days in that month, we want to tackle the issue of Gaza and Israel.
Okay.
And I have many colleagues that are very afraid of that. And I thought perhaps before we set the date for that, that you do a day in January where you address a crowd about this.
Okay.
So before we get to the topic, they have some grounding.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to you about that.
Please do. Yeah, we have some models that I take students and others through in the community where we do some norm setting in terms of what we're up to in the room that can really create a culture in a room, a nervous system in a room that allows people to express things in ways that might have otherwise felt like grenades going off, but doesn't. And then we have some ways to take the competition out of the room with the idea that if you beat me in an argument about Israel and Gaza right here, nothing happens. It's just you and I talking about Israel and Gaza. Right? And so what can we control and how can we control it? So I'd love to, and I'm also friendly with those folks and know them pretty well, the president of the...
Right, Brennan.
Yeah, Brennan. So
yeah.
yeah. So what's your follow-up, though, about the
My
education?
follow-up is I want to have these conversations with these individuals that I know voted. Sometimes they offer me an explanation that I just don't understand why they voted, just simply for the Republican, knowing full well what could come to be. Mm-hmm. And so when I have this discussion, I really want to be able to persuade them to get involved with SINO, to do something that counteracts what they put in motion.
Thank you for that. A few things. One, to the education piece, and this feels sinful for a college professor to say, but sheer intelligence and sheer education will not save us, minus values. The most literate, the most highly educated society on earth and not close in the 1930s was Germany. Right? Education and intelligence and literacy is not enough. Second, I would say, what can you realistically do there, except is to understand that people are very mixed up and the world is not as tribal as it often seems. And so to get more curious about what we call cross-cutting cleavages between what seems inconsistent with the person you identify as a MAGA person, or even within yourselves, where you can find values-based connections. I believe in a safe world. I believe a world where children shouldn't starve to death in the streets. I believe in a world where people should have clean water. I believe that it should be safe to go to schools for all people in all places. Finding baseline values and then working back to policies and facts from there is often really, really helpful in terms of establishing that kind of a connection, because to many of us who were alive before the 2016 election, which is all of us, I think, but who have working, conscious voting memories, that election in 20 and 24 seem deeply abnormal. But if you look at rates of participation, if you look at rates of voting, like to what extent did registered Republicans vote Republican in 2000, in 1984, in 2016, in 20 and 24, and the same is true for the Democrats, they're not different at all. They were completely normal systemic elections. There just happened to be different people on the ballot. And so again, those kinds of choices we'd like to think of as strictly rational. I've assessed all of the information. I have the facts and I'm voting the way that I vote. But it's not an accident that people continually vote the way that they vote, because politics is deeply tribal and more is at stake except just who they think they're voting for. Because frankly, if they were struck by lightning on the way to vote, the election outcome would not have been any different. That they didn't do this. 77 million people, if you're on the left, 77 million people voted against you. And they have really complicated reasons for doing so. And electorates are incredibly complex organisms and species. The day after the election, I interviewed Jamel Bowie, both on the podcast, as well as you were there, as well as at the Civility Theater, and talked about this, that it's easy to say, this election was about race, this election was about the border, this election was about this. And when you drill down into the data, especially of the 24 election, it wasn't. And so you have to meet them where they are, find a common value with them, presuming you want to stand in that way, and then model, again, the kinds of behaviors that you would like to see in turn, with no guarantee of success, but hopefully a high likelihood of a little bit better connection and a little bit better friendship. And that's the goal, because that's something that you can control. The rest of it, you can't. I mean, you can try, and brave souls will, but you can't.
I'm Margaret Seidler.
Oh, hi. Hi, Margaret Seidler.
How you doing, Mike?
Good to see you.
I have a different response for Mackie. And I want you to feel free to disagree with me, okay?
Love it.
And I know you will.
I will. I'll do so angrily.
So I was really paying attention to your language about your relationship with the other person, and you kept referring to them as they, them, they. And so what I know from my own experience, my decades of experience in the field, is that this is about seeing if somebody can change. And the first thing that I've learned that I have to do if I want someone else, they, to change, is I have to stop seeing them as they or them and languaging it that way. And to really start recognizing that if I want you to change, then I've got to change something about me first. And the more that I can soften myself, and I think you call it compassionate curiosity, that makes the space for that person to be able to actually be influenced by you. So for me, as long as you are thinking and saying they or them, there's a greatly diminished chance that anything will improve in your relationship.
Yeah, here to that. And I'll share a personal anecdote too with regards to that, because I completely co-sign what you said. But, you know, I had a son, Sam, who was born in 2010, and in 2013, he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And we watched him, you know, over the course of 2.5 years or so. You know, I left the college, I left my work. We had newborn twins at the time. And we went on a kind of permanent road trip, you know, left everything and just said, we're going to squeeze every ounce of joy out of every day that we possibly can with him, so that he was 2.5 and he lived until he was 5.5, so that he could see as much as you could see at that young age, and see dinosaurs at New York City museums, and see a whale shark in an Atlanta aquarium, and see his friends and cousins in Minnesota, and see a beach in Puerto Rico, and you get it. And we abandoned everything to do that. And then when he died in 2016, you know, for several years, to Margaret's point, you know, I was not a good audience for other people's complaints. You know, I was not a good audience for other people's kind of day-to-day struggles. You know, there was no part of me that wanted to hear about a bad day at work, or somebody offended you, you know. And it took a lot of work to try to then be open to a common humanity. And so part of this work is because I believe in this democratic project, but part of this work is deeply personal for me, because once you can find a space, whether you're a them or a they or whatever the kind of nomenclature that we would like to attach to people is, it comes from a baseline sense of openness to other ways of seeing the world, other ways of making the case, and other people's experiences. And as I saw that if I defined myself first and foremost by my tragedy and the uniqueness of my tragedy, then that is always a closed door, because nobody is going to have exactly the same thing. And then I am inevitably a stranger to you, and you'll never understand me because you haven't walked in my shoes, nor can I understand you because I haven't walked in our shoes. And that creates a world of permanent, inevitable strangers. And that baseline sense of openness to other ways of making the case, even if I think that the way you've made the case is utterly absurd and even offensive, can really create a new network and world from the bottom up, not necessarily from the top down. And so your words mean a lot to me, and that project of encouraging openness and talking to strangers about their bad days and their good ones really means a lot to me too.
Anyone else?
Thank you for being here, and the students, and it gives me a tremendous amount of hope.
Good.
Because I grew up with people fighting for rights, you know, and you know what's happened. They're being taken away. My name's Deborah Whitfield, and I was slightly involved with politics for the last 3 years. And I am also a negotiation expert. And so, I have lately had several challenges within my own party because I'm a person that tries to understand the other side, and I go more to the center, as you've been talking about a lot here today, to understand the other side.
Yeah.
And I've had the challenge of being accused of being on the other side now by people in my own party. So
Right.
and I'm not the only one. I think there's this undertone that's going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but it's very challenging for me. And I get angry about it, but then I try to continue to keep the conversation, and the whole thing is the conversation is not being opened by those people. They judge and blame, and then they don't want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have a lot of friends on the other side, I have a lot of friends in politics on the other side, and I'm not going to change my relationships. And anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you for that, and it really shows the tribal nature of our politics. That, you know, I had a student once who said that she was considering eliminating a friend from her life because she had a friend who told a sexist joke, right? So it's like the transitive property of this way down the line sexist joke, you know, that I heard about in passing meant that she then had to cancel her and cancel her and cancel her, under this myth that we can purify our lives. And that's a small story, but it's reflective of a much larger pattern, which is, to me, of course we have political disagreements, and there's a left issue and there's a right issue, but those get mixed up and they change over time. But my point is that one of the other really important, and this is where my work comes in, one of the other really important places that this is happening is between people who would like to talk to other people and people who would not like to talk to other people. Because I'm not preaching moderation. I'm not preaching that you should not have opinions. I'm not preaching that you should move to the center. I'm not preaching that you should always find common political ground. I think you could find common ground in terms of playing pickleball to maintain the relationship while maintaining your Marxist point of view and that person's libertarian point of view. There is no centrist thing. What I do think is moderating, not moderate in terms of middle of the road politics. What is moderating is that those relationships change how we feel about ourselves. Maybe we take our certainty levels down a bit and change how we feel about other people. But that requires a willingness to open up that conversation. And on the left and the right, there is this kind of force of illiberalism. So for me, it's the battle of classical public sphere, free speech liberalism, not American lefty liberalism, but free speech, classical liberalism versus illiberalism, or the people who would like to have a civil war and the people who would not like to have a civil war. So keep fighting the good fight, and I know that it's hard to face down people who would say, well, how can you even talk to that person? That feels like an act of betrayal. And then we say, talking is not the same thing as affirmation. Talking doesn't mean agreement. The only way forward is with talking, unless you want silence, which doesn't work, or violence on the other hand. Those are our three options. Thank you for that. I have time for one more, so you get the honor, and it better be really good given this.
My background is in international HR and global organizations, so I've lived and worked all over the world. Cool. And a big part of what I found interesting was your subject matter is the core of the leadership principles we drive in industry. You get these big factories with hundreds of thousands of people. You get everybody from all over the place, all over the world, different backgrounds. And one of our goals is having a common community that's respectful, and people feel heard, they feel they're engaged. And that's the foundation of very successful businesses. So I mean, for the students, just so you know, from an industrial point of view, that's not a nice to have skill set, it's a